Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is Jordan. The other day you sent me a text to a link to an article that made me go, holy shit.
Yeah.
And so, as we know, Donald Trump is a scary ass president.
Understatement of the century.
Yeah. Especially for me being brown and such. But also for lots of other people. The thing about that article is that it pointed out like sort of a bigger scheme, a scarier scheme that is more than just like, he's just like a dumb rich guy trying to get his dumb rich money, and like, hey, we might have like a actual authoritarian government regime going on here.
Yeah. Constitutional crisis.
Yeah. So first of all, what's some of the information that points to that?
Well, we knew from the very beginning that Trump was a complicated character, especially in his business dealings, because much of his dealings either aren't based in facts or are based on perverting other people and strictly for his own gain.
Yeah.
So from the very beginning, we should have known that his presidency was not to help the American people, but to help himself and to help his own business endeavors.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it seemed every single time someone brought that up, it was always silenced through some sort of mechanism, saying that, no, he really is genuinely for the people.
Well, either that or they were just saying, well, like, he's a businessman, so he knows how to deal with business stuff because money.
And that also makes no sense, because many of the people that were behind the Make America Great movement are so anti-business, so anti-establishment. And here comes Donald Trump, American billionaire, knowing to take advantage of people, and who's just completely contrary to the belief of many anti-establishment individuals.
Yeah.
And I think that's also where you have the crossover between American parties as well. In a way, our political system is a big circle.
Yeah.
On the far right meets the far left.
Yeah.
On various topics, and one of those is anti-establishment. The far left does not like Wall Street, does not like big business being in politics, and the same can be said for the other side.
Yeah.
And that's also why the populist movement of Bernie Sanders was so strong, was that many individuals that never really thought there was a voice for them on this whole anti-establishment, get money out of politics, get put on reform on Wall Street. That's when a lot of people saw there was a voice for them on both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And on the right, it just so happened that it was significantly louder than it was on the left. And that could be due to a number of different reasons. But the right was far more successful in it. And on the right, that whole anti-establishment policy that Trump ran on was also mixed up in the alt-right movement with its homophobia, xenophobia, racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, anti-Islamic policy. And that also reinforced, like, it brought more people to the anti-establishment policy that became Drain the Swamp.
Yeah.
And so all along, we should have known that this was a ruse to begin with.
Sure.
And now that he has taken office, it is evident that it is, in fact, a giant ruse.
Yeah.
And this is easily seen in his inability to take himself out of his own business entities. He has not yet divested against what he has said and what his tax attorney has said.
Yeah.
He just has not divested. And this brings us to what should be the emoluments clause. The moment he was sworn in, he should have been impeached because he was in violation of Article 1 of the Constitution. He was in violation of the Emoluments Clause, which does not allow the acting president or really any individual within the federal government to accept any outside funds that could be seen as conflicts of interest, could be seen to raise or to bring them closer to other foreign entities. And as it stands, he is still, in fact, getting money from foreign entities. And he has a hotel in Washington, D.C., not far from the Capitol, that it's a Trump hotel, and it's within the old post office building. So it's on federal land, but he's also getting money. His Trump organization is getting money from it. And this is serious because it is in D.C., so foreign individuals that are coming over, dignitaries that are coming over for meetings to speak with the president or anyone in D.C., they will feel pressured to stay at the Trump hotel. And the Trump organization will be getting money from individuals that stay at the Trump hotel. And even though Trump has said that he's about to divest himself from his companies, it's not true. He said he entered a blind trust, and he has not entered a blind trust. A blind trust would mean that he hands his company over to some other entity that he would have no knowledge of the doings within the company. Instead, the company was passed on to his eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., and one of his other executives. And it appears as though he's still in talks with his sons and his business executives as they came over to D.C. recently during, I believe it's Gorsuch's announcement to his appointment to the Supreme Court. So there is still discussion happening with the president and his son, and between the president and his sons. This very well could just be, normal chit-chat, father-son talk. But I would not put it past him to be discussing business ideas. And I think it was either Friday or maybe today, ProPublica, they sent out for an evaluation of his trust, and it's bad. It's real bad. It's really bad. They found that with his trust, he has the power to revoke Donald Trump Jr.'s and his executives' power. Having the trust, meaning that at any point in time he could jump back in and being the CEO of the company. And he also is able to see any net profit, gain, or loss at any time within his company. So that right there is not a blind trust. So his idea of a blind trust is inherently wrong. He is still very much in control of that. And they really should be drawing up papers of impeachment because this is a violation of the Emoluments Clause. He is gaining money through his company, and he knows about it. And he is susceptible to a conflict of interest. And the same thing is, it's the same thing worldwide. He has hotels in Turkey. If Turkey were to, say, invade Syria, do we know that Trump is going to either stop Turkey or anything? We don't know that. He might not want to, get in Turkey and disrupt his own business there. We don't know. So this could spell many problems further on down the road. And so first off, as to how we know that this is a huge issue is his business dealings. We've known from the start that he was corrupt and that he was a walking conflict of interest. Anyone that pays him $1 gets a kind word from Donald Trump. And from there, we've also seen his Russian connections.
But before we jump there, I want to at least do a little bit of devil's advocate so that this doesn't become an echo chamber for,
yes, please,
for progressive views. So I would assume that at least the counter arguments for hey, but Trump is a businessman out for himself in the MAGA movement that they said that he has people's interests at heart, which so far, pretty much all the things that he said that he would do during his campaign, he has done.
Exactly. Most honest politician ever.
Yeah. If that were true. But so I mean, there's still reason for them to say like, hey, look, he's looking out for us because hey, here's all the things that he said he would do, and look, he's done them, unlike any other politician before him, because no one in their campaign actually does what they said they were going to do once they're elected. So it's almost kind of scarier that he's actually done what he said he was going to do. But the other part is saying that, again, since he's a businessman, he knows how to deal with money. But the problem with that is that Donald Trump doesn't do deals for the benefit of other people.
No.
Donald Trump does deals that benefit him.
Yeah.
It's not diplomacy. Diplomacy is both sides getting a little bit of what they want, but not everything that they want, as opposed to outright warmongering or whatever, just getting everything that you want and the other side not getting anything that they want. So, I mean, in his defense, he has been honest and said and done all the things, or at least plans to do all the things that he said he intends to do.
Yeah, he has, for the most part. There are certain things that he's definitely backed away from. Point in case, the LGBTQ reversal on gay marriage. He did back away on that. There were talks and leaks that he was going to issue an LGBTQ executive order, but I believe it was Ivanka and a couple other advisors talked him back from it. And we'll probably get to this later, but the fight's not over with that yet. So as far as it goes right now, that is one promise he hasn't delivered on. And he also promised to deliver on Wall Street. He wanted further regulations on Wall Street to make sure they couldn't bankrupt the American people again.
Sure.
And we saw yesterday that he's not doing that. He's doing the exact opposite, as he has now reversed, or he wants to reverse and do away with the Dodd-Frank Act, which was put in place it was enacted in 2008, but it was put in place in 2010. And its main purpose was to make sure that banks held more money in them than they were giving out lending. That way they couldn't go bankrupt.
Yes.
But Trump has come out and said yesterday that he wants to do away with that because it's making it much harder for his Wall Street friends to get out money. So in the eyes of reforming Wall Street and making sure that another financial crisis doesn't occur, he's already broken that promise as well. Yeah. He has his heart and his best interests, or he's between the interest of Wall Street before the American people as it stands right now with that particular subject.
Yeah.
So, yes, he has delivered on many of his promises, such as the immigration ban or Muslim ban.
Sure.
And as well as the wall. And he has delivered as far as that goes. Whether it's going to continue or not, I'm not sure. But there are also many things he isn't delivering on yet that many of his constituents are not going to be happy about. Yeah. Especially those that joined the Trump train just because of Pence becoming the VP. Sure. Which is mainly the evangelicals. Yeah. So the evangelicals are not going to be happy about many of the things that he's not doing.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people would argue that, but Jordan, Hillary Clinton was going to do all those things for Wall Street too.
You'd probably be right, yeah. I would not. I would find it very hard to argue that fact. But you also have to think about whether Hillary Clinton was going to put out a Muslim ban, whether Hillary Clinton was going to pretty much divide this country even further.
Sure. And at the same time, Hillary Clinton is not the president of the United States.
I mean, that is a really bad fallacy on my part for arguing that way. But it drives me crazy looking back now and thinking that they were equally horrible candidates. None of them were good candidates, but one is far worse than the other.
Yes.
And looking back on it, I wish we would have realized that much earlier. We let the slander and the falsehoods and just the general lies cloudy our judgment on who would have been the better candidate, who would have been the better president, and who had the interest of America, and like, who had the better interest of America, who had the interests of America first.
Yeah. Speaking of lies, so how are these lies being perpetuated? Obviously, there's been a lot of stuff, the good old hashtag alternative facts. So I think I've seen like different people sort of analyze how some of these different people that defend Donald Trump in the media, in the news or whatever, they basically say alternative facts in a way of kind of like how you said, clouding the truth. And so bringing up something like the Bowling Green massacre or whatever.
Hey, it was just a mistaken word. It was a mistaken word.
But for a minute there, it's effective communication because, oh, well, that sounds like a bad thing, obviously.
Yeah.
She has a point. But what are some other ways that Trump's people are alternating the facts?
The Trump administration and many of the individuals within the scope of the administration have figured out exactly what resonates within his base. And they figured out that by resonating that base, throwing kindling to the fire, they can strengthen the voice of that base to such an extent where if they just put in a couple target words, throw in a couple Clintons and Obama and then Islamic terrorism, it doesn't matter what you put in between those words. It'll work.
Yeah.
And it's this consumption of ideas that aren't factually based, that rely almost entirely on falsehoods and lies. And these people just eat it up like crazy. And it's being perpetuated also by the Trump administration, Kellyanne Conway. You have Spicer, you have Bannon. Bannon specifically, these guys are known for taking things either out of context and putting them in a brand new context, or just for making up brand new things out of nothing. So that in a large part is why we have this whole false news, false fact reality. And it also helps them a whole lot whenever you can just say that everything is disproved that you don't agree with by saying alternative or by just saying fake news. If anything is counter to what you believe in,
you just call it fake news.
It's just fake news. So it's the same thing as many of like the evangelicals for the past ever since Darwin, even though evolution has now become fact. Like evolution happens. Evolution is the core of biology. It's the core of science. It's the core of life. No, it's fake news. It's not. There's no scientific proof of that.
Yeah.
The creationism is the way how everything happened. Evolution makes no sense.
And then they continue to cloud that by shutting up all of the organizations that are responsible for research in these things. So shut up EPA, shut up NASA, shut up national parks, because nobody can prove to me that climate change is real. And all you guys over there with the actual proof better shut up, because you're not going to prove it to me anyways.
Okay, shout out for the Science March. April 22nd.
Yeah.
Around the globe, around the U.S. at least, probably around the globe. But yeah, you're completely correct, and it's also operating like the transitive property. Since CNN came out and was very anti-Trump during the campaign, they're now entirely fake news, no matter what happens. I honestly believe that CNN could say Trump is the best president to ever live, and his constituents, Trump's followers, would just go, well, that's fake news.
Yeah.
You're fake. It's fake.
Yeah.
Even though it works in their favor, they would say it's fake.
Yeah.
Just because CNN is now fake news.
Yeah.
So many of our most prestigious, long-standing institutions for facts, especially in the political atmosphere, are now fake news. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, NPR, the BBC, while Breitbart is now our leading source of the new and know-hows.
Somehow.
In Washington.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help that, the ex-CEO and co-founder of Breitbart is effectively president of the United States. Because for all intents and purposes, I do not believe that Trump is president. It's Bannon.
What, who's Bannon?
Oh, dear Lord. Okay. So, Bannon, he's a very complicated character. Or maybe he's not a complicated character, depending on how you look at it. He first got his start in the U.S. Navy. He was in the Navy for 7 years. And then he went on to become an investment banker for Goldman Sachs.
Nice.
Yeah. So it just plays right into the whole.
Yeah.
Let's make America great again. And then became a producer in Hollywood, which I don't think many people know. He became a producer in Hollywood, and in Hollywood he wrote a documentary called Destroying the Great Satan, The Rise of Islamic Fascism in America. It's supposed to be fascism, but he misspelled it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And in this documentary, he painted the Center for American Islamic Relations among other Islamic societies. He painted them as culture jihadists, which are being supported by news agencies like CNN, the New York Times, the CIA, the FBI, the ACLU, and the American Jewish community. So in this film on Let's Hate Muslims, he also threw in some general anti-Semitism, just, for the shit of it. And the documentary was never made. It was just a screenplay. Or it wasn't even a screenplay. It was just a script.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it was never made. And from there, he got into contact with Andrew Breitbart. And he and Andrew Breitbart co-founded Breitbart News. And then whenever Andrew Breitbart died, he became the executive chair of Breitbart. And from there, he's declared that Breitbart is the platform for the alt-right. And the alt-right is now synonymous with the far-right ideology, which is centered around white nationalism. And they've been known through all their many articles, all their very true and factually significant, factually founded articles, that they endorse racism, sexism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and anti-Islamic mentalities. And he's given a platform to many of these horrendous individuals that have now taken over the that have taken over the social media atmosphere, like Milo, who recently caused severe unrest at UC Berkeley, and also Richard Spencer, who is one of the most famous white nationalists now living in the United States, aka the Nazi that keeps on getting punched in the face. So Bannon is directly responsible for the rise of these individuals that are known to provoke those on the left, even those in the center, and those on the right. And try to morph the right ideology into something that it originally was not, but is now associated with.
Something I will say on that is that while it seems acceptable to punish the people who hold white nationalist ideas or the alt-right in general, I I've been seeing a recent flare up of just the phrase "punch a Nazi." Don't punch people. Don't punch anyone. Unless you're defending yourself from a violent attack, don't be violent to people. Don't be the instigator of violence. Don't riot. Don't break shit. Just find the way to be better than them. And be better yourself by doing so. Because you're only proving their point by rioting, by throwing a fit, by breaking stuff, and by punching people in the face.
The voice of the left and of the center goes completely, not unnoticed, but is no longer reputable once violence starts to occur. Then violence becomes associated with the left, much as how now racism has become associated with the right. So I completely agree. We cannot allow violence to become part of these peaceful protests that are happening in response to all of the batshit crazy that's happening in Washington. Although punching Nazis is the most favorite American pastime.
Yeah, but you can't, in the same way that you can't get, angry at a Muslim for having alternate views, how the left is trying to defend Muslims. You also can't get violent towards Nazis. You have to fight ideas and not the people holding them.
I agree with that, but I'm afraid there could come a point here fairly soon whenever words will no longer work.
So sort of, I know you're like, you have another point there. I'm going to put a notch there, but I'm going to go over here and say, obviously I'm not 100% in line with liberal progressive views, given that I quote Sam Harris so damn much. So Sam Harris has been vilified by both the left and the right for holding perfectly reasonable views. In that, while liberals are willing to be angry at Nazis for saying, hey, white people are superior and these sorts of ideologies have to be enforced by force, and we have been appointed by God to be the superior race, and so on. I'm going to say this uncomfortable fact for some of you. Islam is also very problematic in very direct ways like that. While there's some sort of questionable stuff in the Quran, there's even scarier stuff, directly scary stuff in the Hadith, which is sort of a, forgive my religious understanding, but a supplemental reading to the Quran. And basically, it does condone a lot of violence, killing of homosexuals, killing of apostates, which is why you get so many, there's Muslims who are the victims of terrorism, and so these are the people who are refugees of these countries. But there's a scale. In the same way that there's a scale of moderate Christians, you're not going to get entirely, all gay people should burn in hell and God hates fags. You're not going to get all of that from moderate Christians. But the people who read the Bible directly and take the facts that it spews out from there have no choice but to say, this is what the Bible says. Yeah. God doesn't like gay people. In the same way, Islam says the same thing about homosexuals and about apostates, people who leave Islam to be either Christians or Buddhists or just people who leave Islam. And in that same way, Islam teaches that those people are, if not so radical as to say that these people should be killed, it does at least say disowned or, exiled, and so on. And so, it is a fact that Muslims are the biggest victims of terrorism. But you can't also discount the fact that a lot of Muslims would kill an artist or would propose that an artist would be killed for drawing Muhammad. And so before this extreme positive liberalism of, hey, let's help the Muslims, they're being persecuted and stuff, also consider the fact that Islam is counter to a lot of liberal views. Islam is counter to a lot of scientific stuff, is counter to a lot of free speech and gay rights and women's rights. So it's hard for a lot of people to probably acknowledge that, but consider the idea that you need allies in Islam that hold similar views politically and socially, but keep in mind that those are probably the minority. All that to say that even still, Muslims should be persecuted as such, given the Bill of Rights and the Establishment Clause. The U.S. government should not be putting things in place that hurt or restrict Muslims, even for the sake of safety, although facts are in place to show that terrorism has either come domestically in the United States or it has come from countries that are not banned at the moment.
Specifically Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and is it Libya? No, Libya's banned.
Yemen?
Yemen's banned.
I don't remember.
There's one more.
Either way.
Qatar. UAE.
But I'm not agreeing with Bannon, because he's also very wrong in thinking that the Jews would support Islamists, given that Islamists hate Jews almost as much as Nazis do. So, poor Jews. They're just hated by everyone.
It's not all Muslims, though.
No, it's not. In the same way that not all white people are white nationalists.
Right.
But it's a spectrum.
I also think it's a very important point to make that Islam and Christianity are not that far off.
No. The Quran reads a lot like the Bible. And
I think people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm. But back to our friend Bannon here.
Oh, yeah, our best friend.
Yes. See, I put the notch there. I came back to it.
So, Bannon just isn't a nice guy. And even if you agree with his whole entire anti-establishment, racism, sexism, all of everything that makes him a horrible person, it'd be very hard for an individual to be okay with the fact that he did abuse his wife. Like he was charged with a misdemeanor for domestic violence and battery against his wife, and then during the court hearing for these charges and whatnot, Bannon and his lawyer singled out and threatened his now ex-wife, saying that if she did come to the court, that they would make sure that they found her guilty. So he just is a generally not nice person.
Sure. What puts him in so much power?
He is very good at flattering. And Trump loves to be flattered.
Yeah.
So, from what I've read, Trump and Bannon met via Sirius Radio on the Breitbart News Radio.
Where else?
And Bannon did a very good job of flattering Trump and then getting out Trump's ideology and his political views, while also reinforcing Bannon's own political views at the same time. And this built a fairly strong friendship between the two, much due to Bannon's flattery. So Bannon is now Trump's chief strategist and senior counselor, meaning that he calls many of the day-to-day shots that involve Trump. And many of the decisions that Trump makes, he is in direct relations with Bannon on the decisions that he needs to make, talking him through, seeing which ones are good, which ones are bad. That kind of stuff.
Referring back to the podcast that I had with Corey, we talked about Russia a whole lot. Corey mentioned that Trump is basically going to make most decisions based on who he talked to that day.
Yeah.
Now it seems that the person who he talked to that day is Bannon.
Yeah. He talks to Bannon most of the time. And I think what is most frightening now is the fact that Trump has appointed Bannon and Reince Priebus to the National Security Committee. And in doing so, he kicked out the Director of National Intelligence and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the guy that oversees the entire military of the United States, to make room for those two.
I'm guessing that this security guy who was booted from his position probably had a lot of experience in order to be in that position. And now we have a person who may not have as much experience in military tactics and security.
No. He's had 7 years of being in the Navy. That is his experience. While this is a 4-star general that they kicked out.
Yeah.
And now the Director of National Intelligence and the Chairman for the Joint Chiefs of Staff can only come to the national security meetings on an invitation-only basis. Meaning if Bannon and Trump so deem that their presence is worthy. And this is incredibly scary because these meetings are apolitical, meaning that politics are not discussed, or they used to not be discussed at all. I was reading an article recently, and they were saying that whenever Obama was in these NSC meetings, as soon as that door closed, politics were not within the room. If politics were discussed, the generals would get up and leave, and they would not talk.
Yeah.
Because you cannot make important decisions that affect billions of people in the world based on your political ideology.
Yeah.
It needs to be based on a human level, based on intelligence and what is fact.
Yeah.
And now that we've erased the level heads in the room, this very well could be a political shit show that has billions of people's lives in the balance.
Yeah. Military decisions being made by politically blinded individuals.
Correctly. Correct.
Such as the thing that happened to a Navy SEAL recently. And women and children were killed.
An 8-year-old American citizen.
So, other facts on that is that the Obama administration had intel on that operation, and they did not go through with it, given that they did not have sufficient enough information or backup, per se, to go through with the operation.
Yeah. They didn't have the intelligence needed for it.
Yeah. So, Trump, using his insufficient information, put American soldiers at risk, and one has died.
I'd also like to point out that this decision was made over dinner. I feel like it's a really important fact to this.
Yeah.
It wasn't made in a classified meeting or with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. No. It was... I actually have the list of individuals it was with. It was with... It was with Spicer, Mattis, Dunford, Flynn, Pence, the CIA director, Bannon, and the National Security Chief of Staff and Executive Secretary, meaning the dude that just looks over the NSC. Mm-hmm. So, while there were some intelligence officials there, the guys that you want at the table were not. So, the makings of this raid were not grounded in solid intelligence.
Going back to a little bit of Hillary, a lot of what people were saying that was their biggest reason for not wanting Hillary as president is because Benghazi. She lied and some people died. American soldiers died. And so now it's not even a lie. It's just pure, uninformed, just stupidity that is leading to the deaths of your serving military.
And I'd also like to point out that the whole Benghazi discussion was completely overblown. It really was. There were far less deaths on the part of the Obama administration as far as U.S. embassies abroad goes than there were in the Bush administration. And much of the blame for Benghazi, I think, can be traced back to the GOP-controlled House as they slashed the funding by... They cut funding by $300 million for embassies abroad, saying that they did not need any more security.
Yeah.
So many of the problems that stemmed from Benghazi, while, yes, there was some negligence, there was negligence, definite negligence on Hillary Clinton's part. She is not in the clear for this at all.
Yeah.
But,
well, she's pretty good at being negligent.
But many of the issues seen with Benghazi were not simply on the left or on part of Hillary Clinton. It was a bipartisan effort that killed Americans.
And in this case, with our Navy SEAL, was not a bipartisan decision, given that the people in this dinner, not a meeting, but a dinner, were not being apolitical.
No, they weren't. This was... There aren't any definitives on this, but I really think this was to show an arm of strength of the Trump administration, showing that right out from the bat, we can go ahead and start these military raids, strike fear into the hearts of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, showing how strong we are. And I think what's really telling about this is the fact that the Trump administration is calling this a success. Any mission, especially with Navy SEALs, that ends up in it...
most trained military people there are, basically.
That ends up with a death.
Yeah.
That is the exact opposite of a successful mission. 3 other Navy SEALs were injured, too. And they had to blow up one of their Osprey helicopters. Like, the intelligence was bad on this all the way around, without any good plan of doing the mission and getting out of the mission. Every part of it was just bad.
Yeah.
And this just shows the ineptness that is the Trump administration. They're making rash decisions on a dime. And it's incredibly dangerous.
So, given that level of control that we're seeing, these decisions being made outside of meetings, and also the meetings only being invite for the people who they deem necessary for these meetings, what is it that happened with the Muslim ban?
Okay, so the Muslim ban isn't that complicated either. And it appears as though that...
It's also... I mean, the text of the executive order does not say Muslim.
No. But it appears as though that Bannon, Miller, and possibly Jeff Sessions had a fairly large amount to do with the writing of the executive order. And from what I've read, trying to be an informed individual, reading all that liberal media nonsense and fake news, it appears as though that changes were made to the executive order, or when the executive order was first drafted, it was going to allow for green card holders and dual citizens to easily get back into the country with it. But then right before the executive order was issued, Bannon decided to scrap it and just put it out there. And that created massive chaos because green cards are, they're residents of the United States. They're not citizens, but they're residents. And you cannot ban residents from coming to the United States. And the same thing with dual nationalities. You can't ban them because they are
U.S. citizens.
They are U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And that should really scare people, even on the right that support Trump, that he says it's okay to ban citizens of the United States from coming back home.
Yeah.
So that's what caused a lot of outcry. And the ban in itself is not anti-Muslim. It's anti-refugee. It's anti-Middle East.
It's just generally just barring immigration from these places for security reasons. I read the important parts of the text, which, again, did not say Muslim.
No.
And mentioned security pretty often.
And, right. And I do think that security is at the heart of this. But unfortunately, refugees are going to be the ones that are hurt the most with this ban, especially the Syrian refugees, because this ban allows their immigration to be indefinitely suspended. And especially in war-torn Syria, where it looks like things might not be getting better, might be getting worse, that's horrible on the part of the United States to turn a blind eye to that, especially since we caused much of what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And that's where all the outcry came from, was banning the Syrian refugees, and then also learning that many citizens were being held against their will at airports, unable to leave. And some of them were flown right back as soon as they landed. And even worse, some of them that came to the United States from, like, I think it was Iran, were flown to Yemen after landing in the United States. They didn't even fly them back to the correct location.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest travesties of this whole ban was that individuals that had no idea how to speak English were not allowed to see lawyers. And those individuals were then told by Border Patrol that if they signed this if they didn't sign a document, then they would not be allowed to come to the United States for 5 years. And many of those individuals were visa holders, and they were coming to see their families. And learning that you can't see your family for 5 years, I mean, that's a huge blow. I mean, that's an emotional low blow.
Yeah.
And if they didn't sign it, they wouldn't get to see their families. So, of course, instinctively, they sign it. Well, it turns out that it revoked their visa. So they signed a paper that revoked their visa, allowing the Border Patrol to send them back, saying that, well, they're in the United States without a visa. So a lot of outcry came from that as well. And since then, there has been revisions to it. So green card holders are now allowed to come to the United States.
Sure.
And dual citizens are also allowed to come back to the United States. And as it stands, the federal court in Washington has barred the executive order from occurring. And however, Department of Homeland Security has now said that they are going to construct an appeal on the order that prohibits the executive order.
Yeah.
So there's a lot still happening with the executive order, and the constitutionality of it is also up for debate.
What happened at the Department of Homeland Security before the order was issued?
Before the order was issued, which order? The executive order?
Yeah, the ban.
I mean, everything was fine and dandy at the Department of Homeland Security prior to that, but they had no idea that it was even coming. So they were completely ill-equipped. And as soon as that executive order hit, I mean, it was ordered that it had to become part of policy. And since they had no idea about it, they had no idea how to enforce it. It caused a whole lot of disruptions.
Yeah.
And on that part, the Trump administration is telling the truth. It did cause disruptions.
Yes.
But more shockingly, like the things developed afterwards that were far more shocking than that. With because fairly soon the ACLU was able to stop the ban, at least for a short time, to allow those that had come over the United States while during the time that the executive order was put in place, should be allowed to enter the United States. They could have never known that it was going to happen at that point.
Yeah.
So they were able to allow individuals to enter the United States at that point. However, specifically at the airport in D.C., many of the Border Patrol officers were not obeying the judicial order to allow for the release of those individuals. And the White House was telling the Border Patrol not to obey the judicial branch, saying that they need to enforce the executive order despite what the judge says. And that right there that's an imbalance of powers.
Well, yeah.
The executive branch.
The whole point of having these different branches is to check on each other. That is the system of checks and balances. Hello, elementary school government.
School of Rock. So, yeah, there's this massive imbalance of power right there. And eventually they did side with the federal, with the government, with the judicial branch in allowing those individuals to leave. And then I believe at LAX, there were further problems where I think it was the judge in Los Angeles County said that the ban should not be enforced because its constitutionality is up for debate.
Yeah.
And we're not sure that we can't even enforce it.
Yeah.
And the Border Patrol was still enforcing the ban, which means, and if the Border Patrol is not listening to the judicial branch, that means that the U.S. Marshals then have to come and tell the Border Patrol to abide by the judicial ruling.
Yes.
And if they don't, then the Border Patrol has the ability to take out and arrest the Border Patrol. However, the U.S. Marshals decided they weren't going to obey the courts either. So not only do you have an imbalance of power between the executive branch and the judicial branch, you also have the judicial branch not listening to the judicial branch because of the executive branch exerting dominance over the judicial branch.
Yes.
It's a bad time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan. What's the point of the judicial branch? Is it to enforce laws?
It is to make sure that laws that are in place remain constitutional and are constitutional. That they abide by the Constitution, and that, yes. And it's also to enforce laws, meaning like if you break a law, the judicial branch will come down and
dole out the punishment.
Yes. So in the terms of our government, the judicial branch is there to make sure that the legislative branch or the executive branch doesn't do something that's unconstitutional. They want to make sure that what they do has the best interest of the people and also abides by the Constitution. So in this instance, they decided that the executive order needed further research, needed to be looked into further to make sure that in fact it was constitutional. And in order to do that, they wanted to have a stay on the executive order so they could further process it.
Yeah. But what it means is that the executive branch is capable of issuing commands that go outside of the jurisdiction of the judicial branch, which is terrifying.
Right. And I don't know if we've seen this before. I'm pretty sure with Obama there were discussions on many of his executive orders that could possibly have been unconstitutional. And many of the executive orders that never were issued that were going to be issued that were found possibly to be unconstitutional, he dropped. He did not issue them. However, with President Trump, we're seeing now that he doesn't really care whether they're unconstitutional or not, or if there's a question of constitutionality. He will just issue them. And the President of the United States abides by the same Constitution as the citizens of the United States. So if he were to issue something that is unconstitutional, that executive order should not be enforced and cannot be enforced. So President Trump has raised himself on a pedestal saying that he is impervious.
He's above the Constitution.
He's above the Constitution. He is the God of the United States. Nothing can touch him, even the judicial branch or the Constitution. He has unlimitless power.
other forms of corruption that we might be seeing in the U.S. government. Who's the Secretary of State, Jordan?
Mr. Rex Tillerson.
What was Rex Tillerson's job before being the Secretary of State?
That would be the CEO of ExxonMobil.
What does ExxonMobil do, Jordan?
They're a fairly large oil conglomerate.
Yeah, what the hell?
No, we really care about the environment, though. The Trump administration really does. Right. Rex Tillerson is also fairly... okay. Of all the things, though, that we have to worry about right now, I believe that Rex Tillerson is towards the bottom of the list.
Sure.
But there is a fairly high plausibility of corruption there.
Oh, gee, I wonder why.
So there's actually... It's very interesting. ExxonMobil, prior to 2014, I believe, was in talks with Russia to drill in the Arctic. And to do so with, I believe it's Rosneft. It's the Russian state-owned oil company. And this merger was expected to rake in about $300 billion. So it's a lot of money. However, sanctions from the United States were put down on Russia. And then they didn't really get to do a whole lot of drilling then. But during that same time, Tillerson was also won, I believe it's the Person of the Year or it's a Friend of the Year, the Friendship Award, something like that from Putin. Yeah. So there are very strong ties between Tillerson and Russia. And whenever recently Obama put further sanctions on Russia after intelligence showed that Russia did in fact meddle in the 2016 election. And this is where things get kind of interesting, especially in relation to Donald Trump. Because so we're gonna walk a little bit into conspiracy land, because the dossier that was released here, like, I don't even know how long it was ago. Everything seems like a year. It's probably just 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Sure.
The Golden Shower dossier. And it discussed the talks between Trump and Russia. Specifically, that if Trump were to win the presidency and undo the sanctions on Russia, he would have a 19% stake of Rosneft.
Wasn't it like 19.5 or something?
But the dossier was written back, I believe, in June. So this was quite a while ago. And recently, it has been found out that Rosneft has many shell companies that have accounts or shell accounts in the Cayman Islands and the UAE, among other places.
And places where you do tax evasion.
Yeah. And while it very well could be just nothing, the percentage stake of all those shell companies added together is 19.5%.
What a convenient number.
So to say that these two numbers don't relate, or these two ideas don't relate, it could be founded, but it's too close to say that there's not some sort of a connection there.
Sure.
So that was the walk on conspiracy lane. And now that Tillerson is Secretary of State, he can advise President Trump to undo sanctions on Russia. It's already been somewhat seen that he is going to undo sanctions on Russia. He already has downgraded some of the sanctions, I believe, with the transfer of electronic devices to Russia. However, that very well could just be, it likely is not a form. It's not. It doesn't really have anything to do with the sanction on Russia as far as the oil stake goes. It could be just completely innocent, and it most likely is. But the fact that the dossier and what we're learning now is really close together, and that Tillerson is the best friend of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah,
it's all too sketchy.
Yes. So What can we do?
Okay, so I've been asking myself this question a whole lot too.
Yeah.
And because, our future looks futile, hope is gone, death is inevitable, why even bother? But from what I've seen, protests have worked really well. And granted, that could just be part of the system that Trump is trying to put in place. But it looks like the protests are working. So I say if you're in a location where there are protests happening, get out there, protest, put your voice out there.
Yeah.
At the same time, I would say call your representatives in Washington.
Yeah. Although it seems as though they do not give a shit what the callers are saying.
That is also very true as well.
Senator James Lankford, you've been receiving a lot of calls lately about your friend Betsy. And you seem to not care about those calls.
Inhofe's worse.
Yeah. But now that it's on the Senate to decide, with
the calls, I haven't heard that much about Lankford, but with Inhofe, I heard that thousands of people would call his office, and people were asking if he was going to change his vote from a no to a yes, or from a yes to a no, and he said no.
No.
Even though the people have spoken that they do not want Betsy to vote.
So the job of a representative is to
represent the people.
Represent.
You would think.
However, they're doing not their job.
But there have been instances where, it might have been Alaska, I think it was Alaska, where a Republican congresswoman, I think, was going to vote yes for Betsy DeVos. But enough people called and voiced their dissatisfaction with her that she went from a yes vote to a no vote. So it does work. But if you're in a location where you're a known red state and you're gonna win the election no matter what, especially in 2018, then they have no reason to change their vote to cross party lines.
Sure.
So, yes, that could seem futile. And earlier this evening, I saw a phone number that you could call, I don't remember what the phone number was, to raise concern about Bannon being part of the NSC. So you could also do that. I've actually donated to the ACLU recently because I feel like that's probably the best thing I can do currently with my own money, with my own voice.
Sure.
Because money is voice, despite what people want to say and think.
Vote with your wallet.
Yeah, much to my chagrin, I am voting with my wallet and I am helping people with my wallet. Because I here very soon I foresee many constitutional issues flying out of the White House.
Yeah.
Many people's lives are going to be threatened here very soon, whether it be due to the immigration ban or due to the leaked freedom of religion executive order. So I'm donating to ACLU to make sure that individuals that are targeted have representation and can fight these horrible executive orders.
And the thing is that these things aren't partisan problems. These are just violations of the Constitution.
I agree, they're violations of human rights.
Well, yeah. But those are much less solid, and a lot of people arbitrarily change what they think should be human rights or not. However, the U.S. Constitution is an actual document that you can look up right now. We also had one, like they gave us one in...
like a booklet.
Yeah, we got a little booklet of the U.S. Constitution. So it's fairly easy to obtain the U.S. Constitution. And you can read through it yourself and try to assess whether or not some of these things are constitutional or not. And if the Constitution is the highest law of the land, then any encroachment upon that writing should be questioned. Lawyers, friends.
But the problem is now if there's encroachment on it, if the executive branch is not going to obey the judicial branch, then it lies on the legislative branch. And currently, none of the GOP that hold the House and hold the Senate have grown any semblance of a backbone.
Sure.
They are all submitting and bending over to Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And if shit hits the fan,
Mm-hmm.
I would be very hard pressed to put my trust in the legislative branch currently.
Sure.
And while people can slanderize the Democrats as much as they want to and slanderize the left, there are many Democrats out there that are fighting as hard as they can to make sure that whatever is flung at the American people by this administration does not stick.
Yeah.
That it's wiped completely off, completely clear. And they're doing as hard of a job as they can. And many of these politicians are going to rallies. They're trying to get people riled up. They are speaking to their constituents, making sure that the voice of their people that they're representing goes out through them. And I think that is exactly what politics should be. And you could actually say the same too on the right, because many of the GOPers are doing what many of their constituents say. But as we are faced with what very well could be the largest divide ever to happen in the United States since the Civil War.
Civil War II, the return, the electric boogaloo.
Yeah. And so I would say get in contact with your congressmen, women, your representatives. Contact them. If you are pleased with what they're doing, let them know that you're pleased with it. If you are very dissatisfied, voice your dissatisfaction. You can fax them through the onlines.
Yeah.
And
there is the internets through which you are listening to this.
So I would say I've done that. I've faxed my representatives, letting them know that I'm very displeased with what they're doing in Washington. So I would do that. And just let your voice be heard. We're in a time now where people want us to shut up, especially those of us that are young. They don't see us as having real opinions or having real views. They argue that we're too young to see what's happened. We were too young to understand 9/11, or we weren't born during Vietnam. And they use that argument to say that we just shouldn't have a voice, but we should. We are the new generation. We will inherit this country, and we need to make sure that this country will be fertile to us and fertile for the next generations. And it's up to us to make sure that our voice is heard. We need to get out there. We need to energize the populace and make sure that we need to rise above what is happening. I mean, we need to do good things.
Yeah. Hopefully it will not result in a full-scale civil war.
Or a coup.
Or a coup, for that matter. But, yeah, feel free to speak up, especially for the people like me who are not U.S. citizens, who do not technically have a voice. I am subject to whatever you throw at me, and I'm trying the best that I can. So, no, I cannot vote. And so writing to my representative doesn't really mean much. And I'm trying to stay legally in the United States for as long as I can. But it makes it very difficult. Because, yeah, there's people like me who don't have an actual voice in politics, per se. So
oppression only happens if you let it happen, if you remain silent.
Yeah.
We cannot be a silent majority.
So lots of people might not really know what's going on and might feel like it's just, man, there's just a lot of effort to get involved in this mess. Because, it just doesn't affect me. And those friends of mine that are yelling a lot on Facebook, they're just really riled up, and, I don't want to get involved in that. But at the same time, there's going to be a point where it starts affecting you, or it starts affecting someone that you care about. And very soon it's going to start affecting me personally. And I appreciate the people who listen to this podcast very much. While I do not know exactly who you are, I still see some of the numbers, and I'm touched to see that there are numbers there. If you appreciate me or respect me or whatever, I ask that you be the voice that I cannot be. Because soon enough it's going to start affecting me. Yeah. Yeah. What about some happy things, Jordan? What's some happy things we can look forward to?
We can look forward to science, hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, slightly back on the darker side, the facts are hard
Yeah.
to get out there, especially if you work in the government with the EPA.
Sure.
But science is something we can be happy with.
The quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, he said, "The thing about science is that whether or not you believe in them, these things are still true."
It's still true. Yeah. And science is amazing. There's a lot of good things happening. Whether you're excited about the inevitable Mars missions here within the next, hopefully, 10 years, whether you're looking forward to renewable energy, we're making great strides in batteries that will enable better solar panels, which could eventually lead to whole entire solar cities and then hopefully lead to a country in which there is only renewable energy. We can look forward to medicine. It's a fairly taboo topic,
Sure.
and fairly controversial, but the recent papers that came out and discussed chimeras. So in one of the papers, they discussed how they grew a mouse pancreas within a rat, which in everything that is biology shouldn't occur, under normal circumstances. We've allowed it to occur now. We figured out how to.
Sure.
And with that pancreas, they were then allowed to treat mice with type 1 diabetes and effectively cure them of diabetes. And another research group published right around the same exact time that they were able to grow human cells within a pig fetus, which many people see this to be a human pigoid organism, which is slightly true. It is a mutt. But it's very exciting because if we do figure out this new technology, it could allow for us to grow human organs in other animals like pigs and cows.
Yes.
And that would help the transplant community in unimaginable ways.
Yeah.
Because currently, if you need a lung or a heart transplant, you just have to wait till someone dies.
Yeah.
And
how sick is that? You just like, man, I sure hope somebody dies so that I don't have to die.
So it's incredibly brutal, the transplant list. Having your name on a list and effectively waiting until someone dies so you can live.
Yeah.
And it really is somewhat of a death panel because your life does hang in the balance. So this could help millions of people across the world. Yeah. And it would also allow the organs to be fairly cheap. So it would down the cost of transplants.
Yeah. And then maybe at some point, understanding how they're able to grow different species organs in another species, hopefully it'll allow us to be able to grow organs just out of a petri dish, like we're doing so with this company called Memphis Meats that does cultured meat.
Petri dish meat.
And they basically just kind of grow it out of there.
Yeah.
And so there are stepping stones in science.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a freaking spaceship as soon as you learn how to fly.
No. Science is all crawling. You don't get... In science, the only way to get to the moon is to crawl. You don't get to take a rocket ship there. So this is a small step towards what hopefully could be something that could help millions of people. So it's definitely a very big, bright spot.
Yeah.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah. And if you need a distraction from the hellscape that is the real world, there's always video games. I enjoy video games. There's always music, which I make. And there's always just your friends. You can always reach out to your friends and hang out and have a swell time.
As long as you're not deported.
Yeah. Sure, we'll see about that. But, you know, we're going to make it there.
It might not be okay, but it will be okay eventually.
It's going to be okay.
Like science. We'll crawl through it. We might have to crawl through mud and barbed wire and grenades, but we'll get to the other side.
World War I, no man's land. But yeah. Jordan, thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
I don't know do you have stuff to plug?
No, not really.
Are you on Twitter? I guess people could follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. Jay Breezy, I believe, with 3 E's in it. JBREEEZYY, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm Santiago Ramones. You can find all the stuff that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I also make music, which you can listen to through there. And there you can also find this podcast, which you are listening to, which you can leave reviews on iTunes to have nice fun stars next to whenever you search for my podcast on iTunes. And you can say nice things or say very mean things, whatever you feel is necessary to portray your actual feelings of this show. You can also feel free to contact me through my website there. I would like to hear some feedback from some of you. Well, actually, all of you. If I get a massive wave of emails, like, right after this episode, that'd be awesome. Even just like a, hi, I listened to the show, thanks. That would make me feel really good. Yeah, and I always